Think of the last argument you won. The one where you had the facts, the receipts, the screenshot, the article, the statistic they couldn't dodge. You laid it all out, piece by piece, and by the end there was nothing left for them to stand on. Now answer honestly. Did they change their mind? They didn't. You know they didn't. They got quieter or angrier or they changed the subject. And a week later they believed the same thing they believed before, except now they believed it harder. You didn't lose that argument. You did something worse. You won it. And in winning it, you may have permanently sealed their mind shut. There's a name for this. Scientists call it the backfire effect. And once you understand how it works, you'll realize that almost everything you've ever done to change someone's mind was engineered to accomplish the exact opposite. In 2010, two political scientists, Brendan Nyhan and Jason Reifler, ran an experiment that should have been boring. They gave people fake news articles containing a false claim, the kind of thing that was floating around politics at the time. Then, for half the participants, they added a correction, a clear, factual, well-sourced paragraph explaining that the claim was wrong. Simple, right? Show people the truth and they update. That's how minds are supposed to work. Except that's not what happened. For the people whose politics were tied to the false claim, the correction didn't just fail. It backfired. After reading the correction, they believed the false claim more strongly than the people who never saw a correction at all. Read that again. The fact check made the falsehood stronger. It's as if you tried to put out a fire with water and the water turned out to be gasoline. Nyhan and Reifler had documented something deeply uncomfortable. Under the right conditions, the human mind treats evidence against a belief as evidence for it. Which raises an obvious question. How can a brain possibly be built this badly? Here's the thing. It isn't built badly. It's built for a different job than the one you think it's doing. In 2016, a neuroscientist named Jonas Kaplan put people in an fMRI scanner and challenged their beliefs while watching their brains in real time. Some beliefs were neutral. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Others were political. The beliefs people wear like a jersey. When Kaplan challenged the neutral beliefs, nothing dramatic happened. People just updated. Oh, interesting. Maybe Edison didn't invent it alone. No resistance, no drama. But when he challenged the political beliefs, a completely different network lit up. The amygdala, the insula, the same regions that fire when you're physically threatened. When you stumble on a hiking trail, when something lunges at you in the dark, the brain wasn't processing a disagreement, it was processing an attack. And that's the key that unlocks the entire mystery, because your brain doesn't store all beliefs in the same place or protect them with the same intensity. Some beliefs are just information, but others get woven into something much more precious. Your identity, your sense of who you are, which group you belong to, which people would still love you tomorrow. Attack one of those beliefs and you're not correcting a fact. You're threatening a self. Now rewind about 200,000 years and this design starts to look less like a bug and more like a survival feature. Your ancestors didn't survive by being right. They survived by belonging. A human alone on the savannah was a dead human. The tribe was food, protection, mates, everything. And the tribe ran on shared beliefs. The stories, the gods, the rules, the us versus them. Believing what your group believed wasn't intellectual laziness. It was a membership card. So imagine an early human who encountered an argument against one of the tribe's core beliefs and just accepted it confidently. What happens to them? They don't get a medal for intellectual honesty. They get distrusted, excluded. And exclusion back then was a death sentence with extra steps. Evolution didn't select for minds that update smoothly. It selected for minds that defend the beliefs their survival depended on. The backfire effect isn't your brain failing to reason. It's your brain reasoning perfectly toward the goal it was actually built for. Not truth. Belonging. Which means when you throw facts at someone's identity-level belief, here's what's happening inside their skull. The threat systems fire first, before conscious thought even gets a vote. Then the rational mind comes online, but not as a judge. As a defense attorney. Psychologists call it motivated reasoning. The person starts generating counter-arguments, questioning your sources, recalling every supporting anecdote they've ever heard. And here's the cruel twist. All that rehearsal strengthens the belief. Every counter-argument they generate is a rep at the gym. You're not weakening the muscle, you're training it. The smarter the person, the worse this gets. More intelligence just means a better defense attorney. But before you use any of this, you need to know something that most videos on this topic will never tell you, because the story has a twist. Years after the original study, two researchers named Thomas Wood and Ethan Porter set out to map exactly how big the backfire effect really was. They tested more than 10,000 people on over 50 different issues, hunting for backfire everywhere, and they mostly couldn't find it. Across the vast majority of topics, corrections worked. Modestly, imperfectly, but they worked. People nudged toward the truth. The backfire effect, it turned out, is not how humans respond to all facts. It's how humans respond to a specific kind of fact. One aimed at a belief that's load-bearing for their identity, delivered in a way that feels like an attack. And that distinction changes everything, because it means the backfire effect isn't a wall, it's a tripwire. Minds can change. They change all the time. They just refuse to change in one specific situation, when changing feels like losing. Which means if you can make changing feel like anything other than losing, the wall disappears. So here's the part you actually came for. How do you use this? How do you walk into a disagreement, at work, at a family dinner, in a group chat, and actually move someone's opinion instead of hardening it? Everything that follows comes down to one master principle: never trigger the alarm. The moment their threat system fires, the conversation is over, no matter how long it continues. Every technique that works is just a different way of getting past the guard dog without waking it. Technique 1. Replace statements with questions. In 2013, a psychologist named Philip Fernbag uncovered something almost comical about human confidence. He asked people with strong policy opinions to do one simple thing: explain, step by step, how the thing they had an opinion about actually works. Not why they support it, how it works, mechanically. People couldn't. And here's the beautiful part. After failing to explain it, their opinions became measurably more moderate. On their own, nobody argued with them. Nobody corrected them. They discovered the gap in their own understanding, and the confidence quietly deflated. It's called the illusion of explanatory depth, and it's the single most powerful persuasion tool that exists because it has no fingerprints. Interesting. How would that actually work in practice? Walk me through it. What happens first? You're not attacking. You're curious. The guard dog stays asleep while the belief dismantles itself from the inside. Technique 2. Affirm before you challenge. Remember, the resistance isn't about the fact. It's about the identity behind the fact. So protect the identity, and the fact becomes negotiable. Researchers have found that when people first reflect on values they're proud of, things that make them feel secure in who they are, they become dramatically more open to threatening information. The self is already fed. It doesn't need to win the argument to survive. In practice, this sounds like, you clearly know way more about this than most people. Honestly, you're one of the more rational people I know, which is why I want your take on this. You are separating the person from the position so the position can fall without taking the person down with it. Technique 3. Give them a door, not a corner. People don't cling to beliefs because they can't see the evidence. They cling because they can't see an exit that preserves their dignity. So build one. Honestly, I believed the same thing until pretty recently. The old data actually did say that. The newer stuff just changed the picture. Now, changing their mind doesn't mean I was a fool. It means I'm the kind of person who updates. You've reframed surrender as sophistication. And technique 4, the one that requires the most discipline: plant the seed and walk away. The backfire effect lives in the heat of confrontation, in that moment where two identities are squared off and someone has to lose. So refuse to create that moment. Make your point once calmly, almost casually, and then let it go. That's not what I read, but interesting. Then change the subject. It feels like losing. It's the opposite. Minds don't change mid-argument in front of an opponent. They change 3 days later in the shower when nobody's watching and there's no one to lose to. Your job was never to win the exchange. Your job was to leave a splinter. Now, before you go off and start running these techniques on your coworkers and your uncle, there's one last thing you need to sit with, and you're not going to like it. Everything in this video, the identity protection, the defense attorney brain, the counter-arguments that strengthen the belief they're attacking, all of it applies to one person more than anyone else you will ever meet. You. Right now, somewhere in your head, there's a belief that's load-bearing, something stitched into your identity so tightly that you've never once examined it, because examining it never felt like thinking. It felt like danger, and you've been deploying an elite legal team against every fact that came near it, and calling that team just being rational. Here's the test. The next time you feel that flash of heat when someone contradicts you, that instant, rising, need to be right. Pause. That heat is not the feeling of you being correct. That is the feeling of your amygdala treating a sentence like a predator. That is the exact moment the backfire effect is choosing your beliefs for you. Most people go their entire lives without ever once catching it in the act. Now you can. The question is, whether you'll want to or not.